Being on the front lines in the fight to educate the next generation is tough. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with important updates, encouragement, and connection. Welcome to the Institute Leaders Lifeline.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Institute Leaders Lifeline. My name is Mike Sinclair, and I'm Deputy Superintendent of School Support at the Charter Institute at Erskine. And as we know, this is the crunch time at the end of the year. A lot of our principals are hot and heavy trying to wrap up hiring process, get staffed and trained and ready to welcome a new group of kids next school year. You know, it's hard to believe as you wrap up one. A lot of people think that we get to go home and relax and enjoy our summer, but as leaders, often we're already preparing for next year before this year's over. One of our big struggles right now in the education field is finding qualified and highly trained teachers for our classrooms. We do know that as leaders, our job's important, but our most important resource is that teacher in the classroom. That's where the magic happens. And we cannot argue that. As leaders, we have to provide the climate and the resources for those teachers to do great things. But without those teachers, really our hands are tied. And in this episode, I'm going to be spending some time talking to Ms. Tracey Williams and Dr. Tammy White. They have a great new alternative certification program here in South Carolina that I know you're going to want to pay attention to. At the end, we'll direct you to their social media so you can find out more information to get in touch with these two to get involved in Teach Right USA. Welcome to the podcast. Ms. Williams, talk to me about kind of what's the vision? How would you describe Teach Right USA for our listeners that have never heard about it?
Well, thank you, Mike. But before I answer that question, I'd like to say that we just really appreciate your having us on your podcast. I know Dr. White and I are thrilled to be able to talk to your listeners about Teach Right USA and share our ideas for the program. So Teach Right USA is an alternative teacher certification program in South Carolina. Right now, we are working on phase one. We've applied for our alternative certification program to be approved by the SCDE. And so we are just now waiting on that approval. But we would like to see people who already have their bachelor's degree in phase one of our program come to Teach Right USA and be certified as teachers. Those people that are interested in a second career, retired military officers, retired police officers, or anyone that is just simply interested in having a second career as a teacher can come to our program. It's a 12-month self-paced program where they will actually have a job as teacher of record in a school.
Okay.
So they will be getting paid while they go through our program. And then at the end of those 12 months, we will present them with a certificate and recommend them to the South Carolina Department of Education to apply for their initial teaching certificate.
Okay. So I need a bachelor's degree.
For phase one, that is correct. You need a bachelor's degree.
Okay, great. That's exciting. I can think of a lot of people that are looking for a change, and in the culture we're in right now, we're seeing a lot of renewed interest in revitalizing our core principles, our core values. So I think that would draw a lot of people to this work to say, if we're going to change it, we have to go to a younger generation, and that's the way to do it. Dr. White, You've been in education and worn a lot of hats, and you're at Winthrop or been working with all of the higher ed pieces of it. What drew you kind of back into the trenches in this program? What was interesting for you?
You know, a couple of things did. That's it. First of all, thank you for having me here, Mike. But to get to your question, I worked for 25 years in Rock Hill School District as an educator, the last 13 of which I was a principal. So I hired teachers. And I started to see towards the end of that time, the end of those 13 years, it started getting a little bit harder and harder to find really good teachers. And I was blessed with working with a lot of great folks, but the quantity of those folks was getting a little bit smaller. In addition to that, that really started my concern for, this teacher shortage that we're in right now. I started to see it coming for a while, as most educators did. But when I moved to Winthrop in the last 3.5 years of my education career, it was interesting because at Winthrop, I was the director of the master's program in educational leadership. And so not only did I teach and administrate in that program, but I also had to recruit for that program. So I was recruiting for future administrators in South Carolina for the training through our program. And in that, the quality of the candidates became a little bit more challenging as well. I had been an adjunct instructor in that program for about 5 years before I joined Winthrop's staff full time. And over that time, I was seeing cohorts that were not only dwindling in size, but sometimes quality as well. And so I started being concerned as well about the fact that this teacher shortage was in fact translating to a leadership shortage as well, which was great for the candidates because they had increased opportunities for advancement.
Right.
But for the schools, I was concerned. And so when I came to the Charter Institute to start with working with principals for support and mentorship, we started having conversations about this. And we were posed with the challenge to, create some alternative paths to education that might give folks an opportunity to get into the field a bit faster without sacrificing rigor and quality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Ms. Williams started kind of talking about the program. Maybe talk to me kind of your experience in higher ed, how that pipeline looked, and y'all are kind of trying to shrink that down to get that access wider. So talk to me about what that process looks like.
Yes, well, Tracey did a great job of talking about phase one, which is the alternative program that we're looking at for folks that are looking at education as a sort of a second career, those that already have a bachelor's degree. Okay. Phase two is different in that phase two is for anyone who wants to go into education. This would be, it's still a path to a bachelor's degree. And in order to be certified to teach in South Carolina, as it is in most states in the union, you have to have a bachelor's degree. But with the Teach Right program, what we're trying to do is to sort of combine coursework and apprenticeship into a program that might better meet the needs of those that are seeking employment in education. Some might call this sort of a 2+2 program in some respects, and that you would have 75 hours of rigorous coursework at the beginning in the first 2 years of your college course pathway. After you complete that first 75 hours, within that there would be a student teaching experience. And what we would like to see is that the requirements now require that in order to do an internship for education, you have to complete 60 consecutive days in a school as a student teacher. Well, that's very difficult for anybody who has a job that can't take time off in order to complete that. So what we would like to see is to have a change in regulation so that 60 days was reduced to 20 days and that full days, and that we would be able to spread that out over 2 semesters so that you'd have the perspective of working in both the fall and the spring. So you get to see the development of the culture, the beginning of the classroom, the connections with families, the community, and the kids as well, so that you wouldn't be left out of that part. But then you would actually complete your 2 full weeks of full-time teaching, full responsibility in the spring. So that's what we're referring to as a mini student teaching experience. So if a student is successful at that, and then they also have a letter of recommendation from their college advisor, as well as another letter of recommendation from their internship supervisor, then we would like to create an opportunity for them to become an apprentice. And we would do 2 phases of that apprenticeship. We'd have an apprentice 1, which would be the first year, and then apprentice 2. If they're successful in apprentice 1, they'd move on to apprentice 2, which would be the second year. So that would be the final 2 years of a 4-year degree program. And what's different about our program is at that point, they would begin being paid as the teacher of record. So they wouldn't be a graduate of their university yet, but they would be working towards that bachelor's degree so that at the same time they're completing those internship years, they're the paid teacher of record, but they're also finalizing those last 45 hours that they need to get to that 120 hours of a bachelor's degree. So we see this as an opportunity to get students into the classrooms faster, to help address the needs of the schools that are needing teachers. But at the same time, when they're ready, not holding them back from being able to actually practice and get that experience. And one of the cool things about this is sometimes our educators struggle with the praxis test at the end of their program. We feel like they would be better situated to be more successful if we take that praxis after the end of apprenticeship 2, so that they've had some practical experience to apply to that assessment. So at the same time, again, we're not sacrificing the quality or the rigor of the program, but we are getting them in there sooner so we can address some of those needs as they arise and really give them on-the-job training that helps support them so that they're not incurring huge amounts of debt. They actually have money coming in while they're a student, which most of the time, these interns are not getting paid for these internships. And that creates a problem. That eliminates a lot of people who would like to go into education. We see this as removing that barrier for them.
So what I hear you say is the first 2 years, 75 hours, would be fairly traditional in structure. And then there would be a mini type student teaching.
Incorporated within that 75 hours.
Within kind of that second part there. And then that's when the apprenticeship would start, apprentice 1, apprentice 2, those 3rd and 4th years.
Right, as long as they've shown competency and capability to reach
and
that.
have the letter of support and all those pieces. That makes me think about, having been the leader of a dual credit school for so long, I used to always tell parents, sometimes the benefit of taking dual credit classes is not define the path that you're going to follow. It's sometimes define the path that you shouldn't follow. So sometimes I feel like when we delay student teaching to the 4th year, students have invested so much money, so much time, then they get into the classroom, they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So this would kind of address that. I mean, they would get in a couple years, a lot of gen ed, some education mixed in there, but
we would really want them to really front load the content at the beginning of those 2 years, so that is solid by the time they go in the classroom. So then they're able to focus on the pedagogy that comes with creating that career and being skilled as an educator and being good in the classroom and working with students. So, in many colleges and universities, even in our own state, it's interesting because students that go into 4-year universities to complete a program such as this, they don't actually enter the colleges of education until their junior year.
Right.
So this is almost a way to flip that content around so that we're able to get them into the classrooms a bit sooner so that they can make those decisions, but also start honing those skills.
So it's not just challenging the sequence of being in the classroom. You're challenging the sequence of the coursework that we're trying to front load. Okay. Because I tell the story. I never had a computer in my classroom until the last month I taught. They delivered it, set it up, and then I was out the door to go do something else. I was an instructional coach. But every year they would send me to classes every summer to learn how to build a website. Well, I never had a computer, so I never remembered. And the next year I had to retake it and retake it. So it makes me think sometimes we have these education classes and pedagogy classes, but we don't put them in a classroom to practice. And by the time we do, they've lost some of that context on what and why and how and all those pieces. So that's fantastic. What's been the reaction around the state? I mean, I would imagine this challenges status quo, but it's got excitement because now it opens up opportunities.
It does. The reaction has been very positive. I have talked to a lot of personal friends of mine that I've tried to run this idea by to see what their reaction is. And it's all been very positive. Now, of course, they have questions about it. One of the things being, okay, so we're going to get folks into the classrooms quicker. Or is that going to sacrifice quality? And in my mind, no. I think there are a lot of people that the structure of the current model has eliminated them from entering the profession. For example, in my school where I worked as a principal, and even before that as an assistant principal, we had many teacher assistants that were fantastic. And I would love to have been able to hire them to be a teacher of record and the lead in those classrooms, but they didn't have the degree. They didn't have the certification to go with it. This program could actually open up many opportunities for non-traditional students such as them that do not that no longer would have to take a semester off in order to do that internship or that student teaching experience. This would have an opportunity to bring folks like that into the classroom and actually elevate them into the role of certified teacher. So I'm very excited about that. This program may not be for every student.
Mm-hmm.
This is not for a student that really isn't sure about education. They don't really know if they want to go down this path. In my mind, this is more of a product for a serious education major. But at the same time, you're right. It does give them an opportunity to get in the classroom sooner to make those decisions for themselves. But I see this being most appropriate or most beneficial for someone who's really serious about education.
Who's really focused on that piece of it.
But going back to your question, though, we've had a lot of positive results also from some of the legislators that we've spoken with.
Okay.
And some of the leadership in the education in South Carolina. We've been very pleased with their responses. These folks see a need. And it's not just Tracey and I that have seen this need. Everybody who's been in education has been concerned about the teacher shortage that's come about. So anybody that has seen that is looking for creative ways to address this issue.
And another positive feedback that we have gotten is that the fact that we are associated with the Charter Institute of Erskine that has a teacher in every county and a student in every zip code.
Yeah.
And so we are able to address the teacher shortage in rural areas of the state, in every area of the state.
Right.
Because if we do have students that can attend an online program with a university, they can stay in their hometown. We can place them in a school in their hometown.
Right.
And so it's kind of then becomes a grow your own program.
Yeah.
And so you don't face that fact of having those cultural differences that people face when they go into some of these rural schools, because you're growing your teachers within your community.
Right.
So that is another positive thing that we have gotten from people that we have shown the program to.
So let's build off that a little bit. So do you envision there being a limited number of higher ed partners in this? Or will they be one? Can I choose wherever? Have you thought through how that partnership
Currently,
looks?
we do have a higher ed partnership with Erskine College, through the Erskine Institute, but we are open to forming partnerships with other universities as well. In fact, any university that would like to partner with us, we would be happy to sit down and talk with them. So this is not just an Erskine thing, but we do have that network of schools that we can provide those apprenticeships for the students to attend.
Great. So even if I'm already in a program and I want to see it come to my higher ed, if I'm at a USC or a Clemson or a Winthrop or a wherever, this might be something that they would want to tap into you two as a resource to see if they can get that conversation going. I think that's the biggest thing, is the more we talk about it, whether this is the answer for each higher ed, I guess that was going to be a follow-up I was going to ask you. To me, for the General Assembly, the elected officials, they get problems emailed, called every day, but they rarely have a solution.
Right.
And y'all are bringing a solution. So I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yeah, we really are. And, we can run the apprenticeship program. We can help with placement. And then we have a robust professional development piece that goes along with the apprenticeship, and then of course helping those students prepare for their praxis and things like that. So we're open to talking to anyone and partnering with any university in South Carolina.
And just to follow up on that too, simply because we're associated with the Charter Institute at Erskine, that does not mean that our teachers that would go through this program would not be eligible to teach at any school in South Carolina. This would be for certification for a South Carolina teaching certificate. So it wouldn't be limited to those that are teaching in charter schools. A lot of times there's a lot of misunderstanding with that. This would be an option for any educator in South Carolina, or any potential educator in South Carolina.
Right. Were you right on that? You're good?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, I was going to kind of follow up on that. What are some common questions y'all have been getting? Some maybe misunderstandings? Is there anything consistently?
Well, Tracey, if you don't mind, one thing that I thought of with an earlier question, we get a lot of questions about, what has to change in order for this to happen? And so there are some regulatory changes that would have to take place. I mentioned the mini student teaching experience.
Yeah.
The current structure of regulation in South Carolina would not allow for that to happen. So there would have to be a change in that respect. So we'd have to take that current expectation that you have 60 days in that student internship, that would would have to be reduced to the 20 that we recommended, or some other version of that. And then also, right now, you cannot hire a teacher until they have their bachelor's degree. And so until they're certified with a bachelor's degree, they cannot be the teacher of record. And when I say teacher of record, that simply means they are the official teacher of record in that classroom, which means that they are actually being paid for their services there. So in order to do this program, we would have to be able to get allowances for them to be an apprentice 1 and an apprentice 2, but at the same time be eligible to be paid for that. Now, a school district might decide that they're not going to pay them the full 100% of that entry salary. A school district could actually set up their own salary scale for that, which could be, say, 90 or 95% of that portion. Okay. So they could adjust it if they weren't sure that they wanted to go all the way in with full first-year teacher pay on that, although they could make that decision. We would leave that up to the school district. So this is not something that would cost school districts money. In many ways, this, I think, would help them to bring in folks that could help fill the void that's there now. And going back to an earlier question about the reaction from people, most of my colleagues, my friends that are currently teachers or administrators in school districts, when I talk about this, they tell me many of these vacancies right now are being filled with long-term subs. So if it's a choice of hiring someone who's gotten a significant amount of experience and is interested in the field and is making progress and has shown success so far versus a long-term sub, well, that's an easy decision right there. So if it helps folks, we're even happier about it.
Right. So what kind of support goes with that apprentice teacher? So I'm an apprentice 1 teacher going in the classroom. Is there expectations of support from the school or the district and from Teach Right? How does that work?
Yeah, so Teach Right USA will provide a coach or supervisor that will lead them through the apprenticeship, lead them through the robust professional development process, kind of a hand-holding approach. There will be a lot of interaction, a lot of check-ins, a lot of opportunity to talk to these people who are going through the program. And hopefully, in the long run, we'll build a Teach Right community so that not only we address the teacher shortage, but we'll also address the teacher retention problem as we go along.
Right. I always think of, as a leader, it seems like this would almost be a long 2-year interview.
Yeah.
I get a chance to interact and figure out, is it a good match? Because sometimes a great teacher is not a good match. It doesn't have to be an ineffective teacher. It's just the match piece of it. So that's great. So when does it start? Like, if I'm looking at this and I'm interested, I'm like, I got a bachelor's degree, I'm looking to make a difference in my community, I want to be a teacher. When does this start?
Well, like I said before, phase 1 for those who already have their bachelor's degree and are interested in a second career, we are hoping to start in July, but if not in July, we will start the program in January.
Okay.
We have submitted an application, as Tracey said, for phase 1.
Right, you said that.
We are waiting to hear back. So that's why the question is, could it be July? We would love to start then, and we're ready, but we've got to wait on approval from the state. And if the timeline doesn't turn that information around or that application around in time, then it would move to January.
Okay.
But, as you know, January's right around the corner. Yeah. So either way.
Well, and I'll be honest
we'll
with
be
you.
Ready to go.
Principals are looking for mid-year hires.
Yes.
I mean, all the time. I mean, I being in the Greenville area, I'd call Clemson all the time and say, "You got any January math teachers or whatever?" Yes. So that timing could be just as important to have some mid-year candidates.
And we do plan to have 2 cohorts. We plan to have a spring and fall cohort when we get started as well. So, we'll start a cohort every semester.
Great. Well, I know that y'all are working through things, the approval process. There's always questions back and forth. So I know that's a process in and of itself. But how can our listeners find out more information? What's social media, website? What's some ways they can get more information from you?
So we have a website, teachrightUSA.org.
Okay.
We have our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts. So there are all sorts of resources that we can use. And our contact information is there on the website. So if you have any questions, you can give us a call. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I'd love to have y'all back as you move through. Maybe in a month or two, we can come and touch base and update our listeners on where we are in that process. But thanks for challenging the status quo. I mean, that's it. If we keep doing what we're doing, they're dying out. The pipeline's drying up. It just is. We can say all about pay raises and all these things, but there just needs to be a sense of urgency. And the fact that y'all are coming with a solution makes you different. And that's what we're looking for, is answers, not just problems. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
You're most welcome.
It's been great.
Thanks for joining us. I hope that you check out the websites and all of their social media. We'll put those in the show notes so that you can find out more. But as you go through this week, please make sure you take time to take care of yourself and take care of those you lead. Have a great day.
Be sure to follow the Institute on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. At Erskine Charters, we'll have all of these resources, including this podcast, mini stories of our schools, and other things. So check us out. The opinions expressed within the content are solely the authors and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the Charter Institute at Erskine or its affiliates.